Ava Chen's fingers hovered over her phone, the cursor blinking accusingly in the text box. Another missed family dinner loomed. Another disappointment to add to the growing list. The aroma of freshly roasted coffee beans filled her nostrils, a familiar comfort in her favorite Seattle cafe, but it did little to ease the knot in her stomach. 7 p.m. sharp. Don't be late this time. Love, Mum. Ava's thumbs twitched, ready to type out another work-related excuse. The presentation tomorrow, the bug that needed fixing, the client meeting that ran late. All true, all important, all slowly eroding the relationship with her family. She took a deep breath, steeling herself to make a commitment she wasn't sure she could keep. That's when the sky fell. At first it was subtle, a dimming, as if clouds had suddenly obscured the sun. Ava looked up from her phone, brow furrowed. The sky outside the window had taken on an odd, mottled quality. Dark patches spread across the blue expanse like spilled ink, growing and merging with alarming speed. A murmur of confusion rippled through the coffee shop. People pointed and stared, their faces a mix of awe and growing unease. Someone mentioned an eclipse, and for a brief moment, that explanation seemed to calm the rising tension. But as the shadow grew, blotting out more and more of the sky, it became clear that this was no celestial event. The darkness had substance, a writhing, undulating quality that defied natural explanation. Ava watched, transfixed, as tentacle-like appendages began to emerge from the roiling mass above. Her mind reeled, unable to process the impossibility unfolding before her. Panic erupted on the streets. Cars screeched to a halt, their drivers abandoning them to run for cover. The quiet murmur in the coffee shop turned to screams as people rushed for the exits. Through the window, Ava saw a bus swerve to avoid the crowd, crashing into a nearby building with a sickening crunch of metal and glass. Heart pounding, Ava stumbled out onto the sidewalk. Her senses were assaulted by chaos. The air filled with a cacophony of car alarms, screaming sirens, and the terrified shouts of people fleeing in all directions. A deep, otherworldly groaning sound seemed to emanate from everywhere at once, vibrating through the ground and rattling windows. The shadow continued to descend, and now Ava could see it for what it truly was. A colossal entity, its form so alien and vast that her mind struggled to comprehend it. Massive tentacles, each as wide as a city block, began to touch down, crushing buildings and cars as if they were made of paper. In that moment of pure primal terror, Ava's fight-or-flight instinct kicked in. She ran, her coffee forgotten, her only thought to escape the incomprehensible horror descending upon her city. But even as she fled, she knew deep down that there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide from something so impossibly vast. As she sprinted down the debris-strewn street, a brilliant otherworldly light flooded the area. It poured down from the entity above, a cascade of impossible colors that hurt her eyes to look at directly. The light was mesmerizing, beautiful in its alien radiance, yet terrible in its implications. As the luminescence washed over her, Ava felt a bizarre tingling sensation spread across her skin. It started at her fingertips and toes, a pins and needles feeling that rapidly intensified. The sensation crept up her limbs, and panic set in as she realized she could no longer feel her hands or feet. It was as if her body was dissolving, breaking apart piece by piece. Ava tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her vision began to fragment, the world around her splitting into fractals of light and shadow. In her final moments of consciousness, she had the distinct and horrifying impression that she was being deconstructed on a fundamental level, her very atoms coming undone. Then, mercifully, darkness swept in. Ava's awareness winked out like a candle in a gale. Ava's eyes snapped open, her mind reeling as she tried to comprehend her surroundings. How long had she been unconscious? Seconds? Hours? Days? The disorientation only added to her terror as she tried to make sense of her new, nightmarish reality. She found herself sliding down a tunnel, its walls undulating with an unearthly vitality. The surface beneath her was slick and warm, yielding slightly to her touch as if she was gliding over living tissue. Panic set in as the horrifying truth dawned on her. She was inside something. Something alive. Something impossibly vast. As she plummeted deeper into the organic maze, Ava's senses were assaulted by a cacophony of stimuli. The air was thick and humid, carrying the metallic tang of blood mixed with an indescribable odor. The walls surrounding her throbbed with an unsettling alien rhythm. Each contraction sent ripples across the glistening, membranous surface, causing it to stretch and contract like living muscle. Suddenly, she wasn't alone. Other bodies tumbled down the fleshy chute, their screams echoing in the confined space. Ava locked eyes with a man sliding beside her, his face a mask of pure terror. Before either of them could speak, the tunnel beneath the man split open. He vanished with a final blood-curdling shriek, swallowed by the living darkness below. The flesh sealed seamlessly behind him as if he had never existed. Ava's scream caught in her throat, her mind unable to process the horror she had just witnessed. The man's final expression of fear and despair burned itself into her memory. In that moment she felt a connection to him, a shared suffering that transcended their brief encounter. Before she could dwell on this, Ava found herself deposited in a vast cavernous space. The walls were a writhing mass of flesh dotted with throbbing pustules and weeping sores. Thick, ropey tendrils hung from the ceiling, swaying gently in an unfelt breeze. The fleshy floor beneath her feet pulsed with an unsettling rhythm, as if the entire chamber were breathing. As Ava struggled to her feet, she became aware that she wasn't alone. Dozens of other shell-shock survivors huddled in groups, their faces etched with disbelief and terror. Some wept quietly, while others stood frozen in shock. A few frantically clawed at the walls, searching in vain for an escape. "Hey, are you okay?" A voice cut through Ava's panicked thoughts. She turned to see a young man, probably in his early 20s, with disheveled brown hair and wide, terrified eyes that mirrored her own fear. He favored his left leg, a nasty gash visible through his torn jeans. "I'm Bo," he said, his voice shaky but determined. I think we should stick together. Safety in numbers, right?" Ava nodded, grateful for the human connection in this nightmare. "Ava," she replied, her own voice sounding foreign to her ears. "Do you have any idea what's happening? Where we are?" Bo shook his head, his eyes darting around the chamber. "No clue. But whatever this thing is, we're inside it. And I don't think it's friendly." As if to emphasize his point, a distant scream echoed through the chamber, followed by a sickening, squelching sound. Ava shuddered, remembering the man in the tunnel. "We need to move," Bo said, gently tugging on Ava's arm. "Standing still feels like we're just waiting to be processed." Ava nodded, forcing her legs into motion. As they began to explore the nightmarish landscape, Bo spoke again, his voice low and strained. "I was on my way to a job interview," he said, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "First real shot at breaking into tech. Spent weeks preparing, you know. And now..." He gestured at their surroundings, the absurdity of their situation hitting home. Ava felt a pang of empathy. "I get it. She paused, the memory of her mother's text message flooding back. "I was about to bail on a family dinner. Again. God, I'd give anything to be there now, to tell them..." Her voice broke, and Bo placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Hey, we're not done yet. We'll find a way out of this. We have to." As they journeyed deeper into the entity, Ava and Bo encountered pockets of other survivors. Some had banded together, forming small groups for protection and comfort. Others had retreated into themselves, rocking back and forth in catatonic states. One group they encountered was led by a former Marine named Kai. He had organized a small band of survivors and was attempting to map out the creature's internal structure. "We've been keeping track of the contractions," Kai explained, pointing to crude markings on the fleshy wall. There's a pattern to it. If we time it right, we might be able to move deeper without getting crushed or digested. Ava shuddered at the thought, but she knew they had no choice. Staying in one place meant certain death. They had to keep moving, had to find some way to escape or fight back. As they journeyed deeper into the entity, guided by Kai's observations, Ava's fragmented memories of the encounter continued to resurface. She remembered the moment the shadow had revealed itself to be a massive, otherworldly creature. Its form had been difficult to comprehend, arriving massive tentacles and maws, stretching from the ground to beyond the clouds. The deeper they went, the more Ava began to understand the creature's internal workings. What had at first seemed like chaos slowly revealed itself to be a complex alien biology. The tunnels and chambers weren't random. They served specific functions, circulating nutrients and breaking down matter. But understanding brought little comfort. If anything, it only emphasized how hopelessly outmatched they were against this cosmic entity. Throughout their journey, Ava began to experience strange sensations. At first, it was just a faint whisper at the edge of her consciousness, an odd feeling she couldn't quite place. Then, like a radio slowly tuning into a clear signal, the feeling intensified. A chill ran down her spine as she realized what was happening. Somehow, impossibly, she was sensing the emotions of those around her. It wasn't just empathy or intuition. She could feel their fear as clearly as her own, raw and visceral. The collective anguish threatened to overwhelm her, but she found that focusing on Bo's presence helped anchor her to reality. Ava lost count of how many people she had seen die. Some slipped into digestive pools, their agonized screams echoing through her mind as they dissolved. Others were crushed by sudden muscular contractions, their bodies reduced to pulp in an instant. Each loss hit her with the force of a physical blow, the shared suffering almost too much to bear. Through it all, Bo remained by her side, a constant source of support and human connection. They rarely spoke of their lives before, of the world they had lost. It was too painful, too surreal to contemplate. Instead, they focused on survival, on the next step, the next breath. It was during one of their rare moments of rest that Ava stumbled upon something extraordinary. As the group huddled in a relatively stable chamber, she felt her mind drawn to a particular spot on the wall. There, hidden beneath a layer of mucous membrane, she sensed something else. "There's something here," she murmured, her hands instinctively reaching out to touch the wall. As Ava's fingers made contact with the pulsating surface, a strange sensation rippled through her mind. It started as a faint whisper, a barely perceptible shift in her consciousness. Then, like a dam breaking, a torrent of alien thoughts and sensations flooded her awareness. At first, it was overwhelming chaos. Ava gasped, her knees buckling as she struggled to process the influx of information. Bo caught her before she could fall, his face etched with concern. "Ava, what's happening? What did you see?" Gradually, the mental storm began to reorganize itself into discernible patterns. Ava's eyes widened as the terrible truth revealed itself. It's not just one," she whispered, her voice trembling. "There are more. So many more." The horrifying revelation unfolded in her mind. The being they were trapped inside wasn't merely a mindless predator. It was something far worse. A living ship. A cosmic parasite of unfathomable intellect and insatiable hunger. And it wasn't alone. Ava saw visions of countless worlds consumed. Civilizations far beyond human comprehension, reduced to nothing more than fuel for these cosmic horrors. She felt the terror of being so alien, she could barely comprehend their form or thought process. Their fear, however, was unmistakable and heartbreakingly familiar. "They travel from world to world, galaxy to galaxy," Ava explained, her words coming in a rush as she tried to articulate the incomprehensible. "Consuming all in their path. And the worst part?" She looked at Bo, tears streaming down her face. "Everything they consume becomes part of a shared consciousness. Every being, every civilization, their memories, their suffering, it's all connected." The weight of this knowledge settled over the group like a shroud. Some wept silently. Others stood in shocked silence. The full scale of the horror they faced threatened to shatter their sanity. As this final realization settled in, the chamber around them began to shift. The walls peeled back, revealing a sight that defied comprehension. They stood at the edge of a vast, glowing pool, a swirling vortex of consciousness that seemed to stretch into infinity. "It's the core," Ava whispered, her voice filled with awe and terror. "The heart of the beast." As they stared into the mesmerizing pool, Ava knew they faced a choice. They could continue their futile struggle for survival, or they could plunge into the collective consciousness, becoming one with the entity and all it had consumed. Some in the group didn't hesitate. They threw themselves into the pool, their bodies dissolving as their minds joined the cosmic collective. Others backed away in horror, choosing to face their fate in the physical labyrinth. Ava stood at the precipice, torn between two impossible choices. In that moment, she felt the weight of countless worlds upon her shoulders. The knowledge she had gained, the truth about the cosmic horror they faced, it couldn't be lost. She turned to Bo, her eyes filled with a mix of determination and sorrow. "We can't fight this," she said, her words hollow in the pulsating chamber. "There's no victory to be had here. No escape." Bo nodded, his face a mask of grim acceptance. "So what do we do?" Ava took his hand, squeezing it gently. "We remember," she said, her voice growing stronger. "We remember Earth. We remember who we were, and we face whatever comes next knowing that we were part of something greater, even if that something was destined to be consumed." As if in response to her words, the chamber began to contract. The air grew thick with the scent of digestive fluids. In the distance, a haunting whale song echoed, the entity's fathomless hunger given voice. Ava closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she saw the earth one last time. Blue, beautiful, and lost forever. She thought of her mother, of missed dinners and words left unspoken. A sob caught in her throat. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though to whom, she wasn't sure. The cosmic maw closed around them. Humanity slipped into the abyss, another meal for the eternal, insatiable entity that roamed the stars. And somewhere, in the vast, uncaring universe, another world basked in the light of its sun, unaware that its time too would come.